Hello and welcome to the library's virtual lecture, Exploring the University of Chicago's History through the library's map collection. My name is Amber Cullen and I am the library's Director of Development. Before we begin, I will make a few brief comments. You will hear from our featured speakers and Q&A moderator. All other participants will be muted. However, we would like you to participate by asking questions. To do that, please type a question in the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. Please do not use the chat box to enter your questions. If you have issues with audio, you may want to shut down programs running in the background or dial in by phone. The presentation will last for 45 minutes, and then we should have 15 minutes for questions from you. This webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available online. On behalf of the University of Chicago Library, thank you all for joining us. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Brenda Johnson, Library Director, to introduce our featured speakers.
Thank you, Amber. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Brenda Johnson, the Director of the Library here at the University of Chicago, and I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Dr. Mindy Schwartz is Professor of Medicine at the University of Chicago's Pritzker School of Medicine. She has maintained an active clinical practice in general internal medicine for the last 33 years. In addition to her clinical practice, she has held a variety of roles in the medical school and with the internal medicine residency program. Mindy has been an academic advisor, an associate program director, as well as taught a required nutrition course for the University of Chicago Pritzker medical students. Her current academic interest is in medical history, and she has been involved in teaching medical history to students, residents, and clinicians at large. Mindy is particularly interested in the history of medicine in Chicago. She's a member of the American Association for the History of Medicine. Dr. Cecilia Smith joined the library as the GIS and map librarian in 2018. She directs the library's map collection and the GIS hub, offering workshops on geospatial data, and is a subject specialist for geography. Previously, Cecilia was the geospatial librarian and clinical assistant professor at the Sterling C. Evans Library at Texas A&M University. She received her MS in GIS and spatial analysis in archaeology from London College, University College London, and her PhD in anthropology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her research publications focus on historical spatial data, ethics in GIS, and the history of cartography. Her most recent publication explores geomasking techniques for sensitive archaeological site locations. She also co-directs the Modern Shipwrecks Project. And lastly, but not leastly, Ashton Hicks is a Hannah Holborn Gray Graduate Student Fellow for GIS for Historical Campus Maps. She just completed her Master's in Public Policy degree from the Harris School. Congratulations, Ashton. And while attending Harris, she focused on learning programming, statistics, and GIS tools that can help create evidence-based, data-informed policies. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers. Mindy, take it away.
Hi, I want to thank everybody for coming to tonight's Zoom session, and I'm happy to lead off this all-star team. First of all, I am a big supporter of the library. Personally and professionally, I have deep attachments to the library. And over the 33 years I have worked here and practiced medicine, it's the library that's given me a palpable sense of community. Joined by a love of books and knowledge and so much more, the library has nurtured my imagination and creativity. My library collaborations have been the foundation of my professional life, and I have been thrilled by the creativity, synergy, resources, and talent that I have found in abundance. I want to thank all of you who are part of the greater Chicago community. Sometimes people use the term Chicago as a euphemism for the greater University of Chicago community. It shows a depth and intellectual curiosity of this particular locale. And it's similar and different than other communities, but it's our community, and I appreciate that you're going to spend this hour with us. I want to also welcome all my friends, family, kindred spirits, colleagues, and just those interested by the magic of Zoom. Since I was 18, I've always loved learning history and have actively explored it for the past 18 years here as part of my academic life. And what I found is that I'm most drawn to public history, and the history of a campus and a community is well within the purview of public history. But what is public history? Public history is the use of historical skills and methods outside of the traditional academic realm of history. Public historians use their training to meet the needs of the community and the public, whether that community is defined as a city, a neighborhood, a business, or a historical society. It's the audience that differentiates the public historian's work, and different audience often require the public to employ unconventional skills, answer difficult questions, and respond to difficult and unique situations. And I found through my library explorations that my interests really lie in the area of public history. Now, I've actively tried to make history that's real, alive, and accessible by exploring the architecture and leading tours of the campus. And it's my hope that this will help create a virtual campus tour. The architecture of this campus is beautiful, and we often take it for granted. Sometimes I think, what if these buildings could talk? Now, one of the things I personally love about history and I find the study of the past to be very satisfying. And history is always more complicated and nuanced than we initially think. There's much to be learned, and I always eagerly want to share what I've discovered. So how did I wind up partnering with the map collection? Well, several years ago, I wound up wandering into this part of the library when I was researching the history of Camp Douglas, the infamous Chicago prisoner of war camp during the Civil War. And it was then that I discovered this incredible place. And if you take a look at the library website, you can see from that this resource, the University of Chicago Map Collection, is one of the largest university map libraries in North America, having 475,000 maps, 10,000 air photographs, 2,000 books, and hundreds of gigabytes of spatial data constitute a rich source of information for scholars and other users. But I think it was this project that really got legs when I introduced myself to Cecilia. She didn't think I was crazy, just enthusiastic, and she really liked the idea of combining the resources in an innovative way. And it turned out that the three of us, Cecilia, Ashton, and I, all went on a walk on that fateful Friday, March 13th, kind of the last day that we were able to be in close contact before we all got the shelter at home order. And so it's particularly satisfying to bring this project to life as we come out of the first chapter of this COVID saga. So my goal is to use this virtual campus tour as a vehicle to teach about the history of U Chicago medicine. And I hope to highlight and share some of the amazing resources of the U of C library and many of its varied departments. And now what I want to do is I want to show you a little picture and a tour, a PowerPoint of one of the most interesting buildings on campus and how I was able to discover interesting information in our special collections. So what I'm going to do is share the screen, and I'm going to show the first, let me just get this right here. Okay, great. So this is a picture of the Center for Care and Discovery. This is the newest building on campus. And you can see this this is one of the largest buildings on campus. You can see this from miles around. And on the top, it says the University of Chicago Medicine. Now, this is a view, for those of us who are really familiar with the campus, this is a view from Washington Park looking up from the DuSable Museum. Now, while I practice medicine in the DCAM and in the hospitals, my academic office is in the Chicago Lyingin Hospital, which is this beautiful, iconic building. And this is a picture from the 1930s from our special collections. Now, the Chicago Lyingin Hospital was the work of its prime mover and patron saint, Joseph B. DeLee. And DeLee was obsessive in his commitment to maternal health and child welfare. Totally dedicated to his profession, DeLee never married, put his heart, soul, and all his financial resources into his practice. The original Chicago Lyingin Hospital opened February 14th, 1895. And we found this old map which shows where it was located. First of all, you can see in the 19th century, hospitals look a lot like regular buildings. They're not like common hospitals that we know now. And you can see this was located at the corner of Newberry and Maxwell Street, 1 block from Halstead. And remember, this was the time when 12th Street was Roosevelt Road. This is a picture looking from the parking structure, a sweeping view of CLI in its beautiful Gothic architecture. And this is the entrance, which shows the Chicago Lyingin Hospital and Dispensary, founded by Dr. Joseph B. DeLee in 1895. Now, this is a great map, and for those of you who are map aficionados, and I know many of you are, you can tell this map is from 2000, it's before 2013 because of 2 items. First, it's got the Ingleside building, which was the home of the previous post office. And instead of the Center for Care and Discovery, it has hospital parking and a blank space behind it. And it shows the location of the original buildings on the medical center campus. So here's another picture that I got from the special collections and shows this picture of the Chicago Lyingin Hospital. Now this was, when it moved to campus, it was a 3rd iteration. It was originally at the Maxwell and Newberry Street, then it moved to 51st and Vincennes, which is now the location of Providence Hospital. And they really wanted this Chicago Lyingin Hospital here on campus. Joseph B. DeLee was supposed to be the head of obstetrics. It opened in May of 1930. And later that month, the first baby was delivered. But looking at the architecture, I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, I want you to look at these plaques that are at the top of the cloister. And here's a picture. Joseph B. DeLee wasn't Time Man of the Year, but he was on the cover of Time magazine, May 25th, 1936. And this is a great picture from our special collection showing the laying of the cornerstone for CLI. And it shows Dr. DeLee. It shows Robert Maynard Hutchins, who was the president of the University of Chicago at that time. And just to Hutchins' left is Mrs. Kellogg Fairbank, whose name was Janet Ayers Fairbank. And the backstory of this was DeLee and Mrs. Fairbanks fought tooth and nail. They were like oil and water because DeLee was a very paternalistic physician, and Mrs. Fairbanks was a feminist and a female advocate way back in the day. And they just, despite the fact that they were both very passionate for the Chicago Lyingin Hospital, their interpersonal life was very complicated. Now, ultimately, this cloister was named for Janet Ayers Fairbanks. She was the president of the Chicago Lyingin Board and was responsible for raising a lot of money. And for those of you who are familiar with campus know, this is actually the area where the new Student Health Center is being built. And taken from a book, this was told to me many years ago by a man named Dr. Marshall Lindheimer, that there was a plaque right in the middle, and I'll show you where that is, that's right here, and was left blank because these were, on the plaques were some of Dr. DeLee's kind of obstetric heroes, Porro, Palfin, Van Deventer, and Smelly. And one of the interesting things is where our the primary care group and general medicine offices is located in the located right opposite CLI. And so when they opened up the area to reconfigure the space, we found 3 new plaques, including one to Ambrose Paré. This is Baudelac and Sanger. And one of my favorite things was, as I was exploring the special collections, I actually found the original letter written by Franklin McLean, who was then the chairman of medicine, to Carl Erickson of the builders Schmidt, Garden, and Erickson. And I want to read this to you to show that this indeed actually was what was planned at the very beginning. Referring to the 8 shields on the Lyingin Hospital, one, preferably one facing the midway, should be kept blank, but made suitable for future carving to conform with the general style of the others. As Dr. DeLee's suggestion, this is to be kept blank for the present and to be filled in some time in the future when the cause of eclampsia is discovered. Eclampsia was also known as toxemia, was one of the 3 fatal killers of pregnant women, the other 2 being postpartum hemorrhage and infections. But this was such a beautiful example of how our special collections can help make this history come to life. So my hope is that this project, and this is kind of words that I live by, so my hope is that this project, which will be demonstrated tonight, will be part of an exploration and documentation of the history of UChicago medicine. And I am thrilled to be part of this project and will continue to work to link the variety of campus and library resources to the largest possible audience. At this time, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague and partner in crime, Cecilia, who will detail her role in the project and how she came to work with Ashton, who designed and created this, project that we'll see in a few minutes.
Great, thank you, Mindy. It's always so wonderful to hear you share those stories of campus. It still gets me excited for working on this project. And no, I don't think you're crazy. This is a lot of fun. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening. I'm just going to share my screen here and get a little presentation here started. So I'm Cecilia Smith. I'm the GIS and Maps librarian, and I've been lucky enough to be able to work on this project. In a few minutes, we're going to turn over the time to Ashton, who is going to bring us a walkthrough of these mapping applications that we've created. But before we do that, I just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit more about the creation of the project. In particular, what I wanted to do was talk about the collaborations and resources that went into it, why we chose a spatial approach or a mapping approach, what actually went into creating these maps, and finally, the opportunity that we had to work with a Hannah Holborn Gray Fellow. So to get us started with the collaboration and resources that went into this, I wanted to start off in saying that the maps are complex things. And when you add layers of interaction in the way that we've done in this project, it's really important to tap into different domains of expertise to make sure that you can pull it off. And so we were lucky enough to be able to do that. We've already heard from Mindy. She clearly has a deep expertise in UChicago medicine and its history, and has brought along with her archival research as well. We were also fortunate to work with Ashton and her experience with GIS data and with web design. So this was truly a collaborative and very fun project to bring together. In addition to our collaboration, there are a number of units within the library, but also on campus, whether they know it or not, who've helped facilitate this project. Mindy has already mentioned her work in the Special Collections Research Center. That's certainly a prominent theme throughout these applications, and we hope to increase those linkages going forward. Something that I'll talk about in a little bit is that we have a base foundational data layer of campus, of all of the buildings that we'll see. And that was provided to us from facility services, and we're so grateful for that. It really came out lovely. A number of other different groups in the library, the map collection, the Research Computing Center, and the Digital Library Development Center have also been helpful to us along the way with our apps and working with the web exhibits page, and so we thank them. It's really been wonderful to see this project come together and to have a home within the library. It feels like a natural home for it because, you know, if the library is an information hub, then it just seems like a good place for it to live, and it's been a great experience so far. And so next what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about this spatial approach that we took. Why not take this information and put it as a narrative on a website, or use a timeline or something like that, which would also be good approaches, but why maps, right? And the way that I wanted to start that conversation off was to show a fan favorite from our map collection. So this is the University of Chicago in 1932. This is a lovely map. It's bright, it's bold. We have some lovely colors. We see hand-drawn images of some of the buildings on campuses. We see people and activities, lively activities taking place. And it's pretty clear why this would be a favorite of folks who come to visit us. I think that one of the reasons that this is a favorite is because it's really a time capsule, right? It's showing a particular time and particular place in our history. So it's really wonderful. Another reason why I think that people really love maps or enjoy engaging with maps is because they show the spatial relationships that we're usually not privy to on the ground, right? And those spatial relationships are really part of the core foundational thought in geography. So if you'll indulge me in a very short geography lesson, its first law is that everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. Now, this sounds like a really simple statement, but it's deceptively so. Part of what this means is that our environment and the history of our environment influences and impacts our life. So the built environment of UChicago is impacting how we learn, how we teach, how we research, our relationships on campus. And maps help us to see those relationships, and I think that's why it makes this format really effective for this particular project. So on this slide here, we have another map of campus. We have a map brought to us from 1969, another lovely piece. I chose this one for this slide because it shows these really nice, simple building outlines of campus, and that's going to be important for this piece here. So I wanted to just take a minute to talk a little bit about our approach to building these interactive maps and the decisions that went into it. So early on, Mindy and I were discussing, and we knew that we wanted to do a deep dive into the history of UChicago medicine. That was clear. But another thing that quickly became apparent is that this would be a great opportunity to set up some infrastructure so that way in the future, we could also facilitate more stories of campus. That was really important to us. And so what we decided is to do a modular approach. And what I mean by that is we're going to spend a good chunk of time and expertise into building a flexible base layer of campus. So that way, we could tell different stories from different areas, not just UChicago medicine, although that's going to be our first important story. And when that was in place, the next thing would be to support user-friendly story mapping. That way, folks who want to tell the story of parts of campus or different aspects about campus don't have to be experts in this GIS technology that I'm talking about, but they can focus on the historical narrative, and they can draw in some of these infrastructure layers that I'll be talking about next. So here is what our base layer looks like. These are all of the building footprints on campus, or some of them at least. They do extend well beyond the screen. But this is main campus here, and we have quite a number of buildings. And we were lucky enough to work with Facility Services to get a copy of this layer, and so we're really grateful for that. Once we received this, the next step was to enrich it with some information that would be of general interest, so that way other researchers and other students who want to add to this story could do so. So we did a few things. We added some information where possible. We added the year that a building was built, the architects that were involved in its construction, and then where available, historical images. And then once this was in place, we could use that story mapping platform that I talked about. So this is an example of ArcGIS Online. And here we have our very first story map. And this is our deep dive into our UChicago medicine. This is an exploration into that history. Over on the right on the screen, you'll notice that that is our same base layer that I mentioned before, but of course now it is UChicago maroon. And then on the left, we're able to provide all of this wonderful content that came as a result of Mindy's work researching the history and her deep dives into special collections. And so we're able to bring that together, and in a little bit we can go on a virtual walking tour of campus, which is, I think, welcome, is certainly by me as someone who hasn't been able to be to campus in a number of months. It's great to be able to experience that. One thing that I wanted to mention is that this is a user-friendly application. It has a WYSIWYG interface, and by that, I mean what you see is what you get. You don't have to worry about programming or GIS coding on the back end or anything like that. You can focus on the story, you can add your images, you can add your links to your source material, and then you can share your story. And our plan going forward is to continue to produce these stories of campus and to hopefully incorporate others to do so as well. And we're really excited that we have these base layers in place to enable this. Finally, if it hasn't been apparent already, there's quite a bit of work that goes into something like this. And Mindy and myself certainly didn't have the time to devote to this project that the project really demanded. And so we were lucky enough that the library could connect us with a fellow through the Hannah Holborn Gray Graduate Student Fellowship Program to help us to complete this work. And so we were able to bring along Ashton Hicks, who is our GIS fellow for historical campus maps. And over the past year, she has been working to collate these resources, to bring in the content that Mindy was sharing with us, to do all the troubleshooting, and to really help us to bring these stories alive. And so we're just so grateful for all of the work and effort that she has put in here. And we're really excited for her to bring us through this walkthrough next. Before I pass it over, I'll just mention that this is our 1956 edition of campus, another bird's eye view, this time facing east toward the lake, which is quite lovely. And I'll also mention that we've collated these campus maps and we've put them in with our web exhibit page, which we will see shortly. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. So thanks, Cecilia. I am Ashton Hicks. I was the Hannah Holborn Gray Fellow who got to really take lead on a lot of the applications. And I'm going to walk you through the website. I'm going to share my screen and show you the applications that I made and kind of talk about what they do, how you use them, things like that. So this is the website. It is part of the library website, so it's an online exhibit. Anyone can look at it at any time. So the first application that you see here probably looks a little familiar. You have that same base map in the maroon color, but I added another layer to kind of make it a little more interactive. That's talking about notable faculty and alumni. So there's a lot of them. This list can definitely be expanded upon, but I kind of gathered resources using previous library exhibits and sources that were on various UChicago websites. So there are instructions that pop up when you open this that tell you how to work the application. So I'm going to walk you through this one. So everything is very interactive, which is a really cool way to present information, I think. You can spend as little or much time on each of these applications as you want. So for this one, for example, you can scroll around, zoom in and out, and all of these buildings that are of campus can be clicked on, and you can see, there we go, what they are. So for example, this is Harper Memorial Library. We get information on the year that it opened, any other common names that it might have, and then the architects who made it as well. So you can explore campus as much as you want and see kind of the architects who made it and how old certain buildings are, for example. And then the other layer on this map are these dots that show the notable faculty, or some of the notable faculty and alumni from UChicago. And this is also interactive, which is fun. So say you have interest in economics, maybe history, math, and physics. So I don't know if you saw, but a lot of those dots disappeared and we're left with a few on certain buildings. So I can zoom in. So let's go here, for example. So I can say this building is Eckert Hall. And if I click on this point, I get information on a notable faculty or alumni member. So we get to see the department that they worked in. This has achievements. So for example, this is a Fields Medal winner. And then we have a link to where I got this information if you want to learn more. And just to, make sure that everything is cited properly. And you can also look at, all of these points if you want. So you can say show all and just kind of click through and see who all these people are and the cool things that they invented or the innovations that they made in their fields. So this is this first application that kind of just is a broad overview of campus. So scrolling down, we have information about where the layers that were used in making this map came from. So as Cecilia mentioned, we used campus facilities, digital footprints, and then most of this qualitative information came from special collections. So we have some links there. So this next application is talking about the growth of campus. So this I thought would be fun to look at. You kind of can see in the first application the years that buildings were built, but it's kind of still hard to see how campus grew, maybe what it looked like in the early 1900s versus 1950s versus now. So this application, it's also completely interactive. So these buildings can also be clicked on or hovered on to show what the building is, who built it, that same little pop-up of basic information. But this time the buildings are color-coded by the architect who made them. And you can either click this down arrow and choose the year that you want to kind of see campus as a snapshot. So say, what did campus look like in 1932? You would click this and it would populate and show you what campus was like at that time. But I think the more fun way to view this is these are pretty much play, stop, and rewind buttons. So I'm just going to play this and hopefully you can see the buildings start to populate. So you can see what year this is, and then also a lot of information just from this color coding, showing who the architects were who made early campus, who made, who was really prominent in building UChicago buildings in, say, the 40s, some different information like that. So I'm just going to let this play through for a little longer so you can watch campus grow. And this can also be zoomed in and out if you can't see this. And there are instructions as well. So even if I wasn't walking you through, it should be easy to figure out what buttons to click to make everything work. So this is that. I'll just kind of fast forward to show you, see if it'll show up. There we go. So there's a lot more buildings. You can, play with this on your own time, and you can deep dive as well. If you're really interested in a certain year, maybe it was the year you were mostly on campus, you can look and see what campus was like at that time and then kind of how it's grown since, for example. So this last section on this site or on this homepage is the gallery of interactive maps. So there's just one for now, which is on UChicago Medicine, but we really hope to grow this project and offer more fellows or other people a chance to create a story map, since it is pretty easy. It doesn't take as much technical skills as these previous applications I showed did. So I'm going to click this link to open the story map. And here we go. So this is the landing page that Cecilia showed you. So you get an introduction and some information about where this, where all of this information I'm going to show came from, which a lot of it is from the photographic archives, special collections, and then also Mindy did a lot of research and had some materials put together as well that we got to use. So the way the story map works is this text is linked up to the map pretty much. So as I scroll through the text, the map is going to update based on where I am in the story. So for example, this is just kind of introducing campus, talking about when it was founded, the first university president, and why he wanted a medical facility, and why it couldn't be originally built on campus due to some funding and financial issues. So we actually formed an affiliation with Rush Medical College. So if I'm scrolling through, I get a pop-up that shows me the original location of Rush Medical College, some pictures, some historical photos, and then continuing to scroll, I get some information about Rush Medical and the affiliation that the university had with it. So you can still see campus, you can see where Rush Medical College is. And then if I continue scrolling, we get to Billings Hospital, which is the first part of this virtual tour of UChicago Medicine. So again, we get the same pop-up with this basic information, like the year the building opened. But the story maps really allow you to add more text and images and make everything really easy to read through and look through. So this text is just talking about what Billings Hospital is, when it opened, things like that. And then we get some more photos. Most of these photos that are obviously not current come from the photographic archive, and we have links throughout the story map to that, so you can see where those sources came from. So scrolling through again, so for example, the Chicago Lyingin Hospital that Mindy talked about some had its original location up here at Maxwell and Newberry. So we can see where that is in reference to campus, get some information about the original location of the Chicago Lyingin. And as we scroll through, we're back on campus because there was actually a Chicago Lyingin built on campus eventually. And we get to, again, see some pictures. Some are recent, some are historical, just to kind of see changes over time. And the rest of the story map is kind of a walking tour. So if you look, the Chicago Lyingin is here, and if I scroll down to Goldblatt Pavilion, it's the building right next to it. So the way the rest of this works is it's kind of a or a counterclockwise circle, I guess, of the medicine campus. So kind of repeated, just the same sort of process where you get this qualitative information. Your fun pop-up, which you can close out if you want. You can move this around and then see some pictures and learn about the history of UChicago Medicine. So I'm sure you can think of a lot of different story maps that could have this same layout. You could do this for those same notable people and alumni. You could do this for all of campus and talk about which departments are in which buildings, things like that. But this is the way that this story map operates as you scroll through. So I will not go through all of this, but just wanted to give you a general idea of how that worked. And then going back to the website page. So this was all of the homepage that we made. Then the other sites, the other fun one is this digital map archives, which are not interactive, but Cecilia showed a lot of these, which are really fun to see, kind of a static view of campus. So again, like this map comes from the 1930s, and this one comes from 1956, and kind of, you can click on these, zoom in, and kind of see how campus has changed and grown throughout the decades. But I think, adding that interactive layer is really fun and interesting. And so it kind of takes away the work of having to dig around yourself, and just kind of having all of this information presented to you in a very interactive way, I think is really great. The other pages on the website are, again, about medicine campus history. Mindy actually made another library exhibit about the history of medicine, so we will link that here. We tried to link out to as many things as we could, and that's another thing that we could expand upon, is kind of link to other UChicago websites, other maps, or other stories that people have written about the history. Excuse me. And then the about the project is talking about who was part of this. Sorry, my throat has a little tickle. but I think that's pretty much it. So this website, I'm sure we can get a link posted in the chat if it's not already. But here's the link right here. Again, it's on the library site, so it's very accessible to reach. And so I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brenda to start the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Mindy, Cecilia, and Ashton. That was really great hearing about this wonderful project. So now it's time to open up the discussion for questions from all of you in the audience there. And just as a reminder, we're asking you to put your questions into the Q&A section of box down below at the bottom of the screen. We do have a couple of things already, so let me go ahead and start. The first, there's a really good question asking you, Ashton, what was your source or sources for the individual faculty bios that you brought up by department or building?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the different faculty bios, I used a website. I believe it's uchicago.edu/breakthroughs. And then the other one was a library exhibit, a web exhibit that you could find that's called Scholars and Innovators. So both were part of UChicago's library websites or a UChicago website in general. And so those are the sources that I use to get those bios.
Great, thank you. Now someone has asked that you put up the link, but you just mentioned that you were going to put that in the chat, and you pointed out where it was. We have someone who's got some great eagle eyes that's caught a couple of misspellings, and we'll make sure to get those to you. So then another question is, are we keeping track of the blank shield so we can fill it in when appropriate? Do we know what that means?
The blank shield meaning like when they're going to put somebody up about eclampsia. I mean, it's interesting because we actually have a woman who was recruited specifically to U of C who is an expert in eclampsia. And so it'd be interesting to see if she's actually would be considered somebody who would be put in there. It's a great question. You know, what would constitute? Would it be curing it, identifying and understand the pathophysiology? It would, whoever that's going to be, who knows, it might be a woman, but I think it's really interesting. And I don't think, maybe I'll even talk to Ernst Lengel, who's the head of OB-GYN. I wonder if he even knows. It's probably in his purview to be like the captain of taking that over. So that's a great question. It does raise a bigger issue, and who knows, maybe we'll see that in our lifetime. I think what we're going to see before then is that new student health center, which is growing up as we watch. So I think it's fascinating, but good question.
Thanks, Mindy. Also a question, are there many facilities off campus in the system somewhere?
You know, I just want to say one thing is about the medicine thing, and then I'll let you talk, Ashton, is that one of the interesting things about UChicago Medicine is we have a lot of offsite facilities, and we have historically had a lot of associated institutions. So that could be a huge map. Like right now, the U of C health system is affiliated with Ingalls and North Shore. So Ashton, we may need a much bigger map when that gets iterated. So I'll let you take over and talk.
Yeah, I was going to say that base map that we have of the campus buildings, it does expand to, like, we have some buildings in the Loop of Chicago, for example, and other states and stuff. So there's the base map that includes all of campus buildings. For this project, we just focused on the main campus and really the medical campus. But I believe the facilities department does have a base map that includes any sort of related campus building. So it would be possible to kind of dig up some information or do sort of an off-campus tour, for example.
Great. We have someone who says, great talk. We love the 1932 pictorial map. Where can we purchase a facsimile?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I think I have seen it floating around for sale, but we do have it in the map collection, so we can probably arrange getting you a scan of that map, perhaps. If you want to shoot me an email afterward, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
Okay, are there other questions people want to put into the Q&A? And while you're thinking about it, I'll ask one. We have a number of Hannah Holborn Gray graduate student fellows, and just as we've heard from Ashton, we gain so much from them and we learn so much from having them work in the library. But I always like to know what you've learned from the experience. So maybe Ashton, you could speak to, what was your greatest takeaway, or what did you maybe learn through your fellowship program that will help you as you next step of whatever your career or educational career is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that really kind of shows through in this webinar is the power of collaboration and kind of the strength that combining both qualitative, quantitative, technical, and non-technical skills really brings to a project. I think, Mindy and her really great skills at deep diving into research and presenting us a ton of information. And my skills in GIS, being able to take that information and put it in an interactive format that's maybe a little more technical, I think is something that's really powerful and something that I really enjoy doing. As mentioned in the beginning, I just graduated from my master's in public policy. And I think studying public policy, there's a lot of benefits in looking at both quantitative and qualitative aspects. And so I think with this project, it was really important to not just do a bunch of tech stuff, just for the sake of it, and not just like put out a ton of information, like basically write a book about UChicago medicine, but to kind of combine the two, I think is where a lot of strength in my skills and policy, which is what I enjoy studying, and then this project lie. So it really was a great fit for me to be able to learn how to collaborate with people of different skills and see kind of the strength that doing that really brings to a project.
Great, thank you. So someone is remembering that Mindy said she was planning a virtual tour of campus and wondering if she has taken the Chicago Architecture Center 2-hour walking tour of campus, and noting the next one is Saturday, July 11th at 10 a.m. Must be a public service announcement here. And the tour doesn't include the medical campus, but it does give a great deal of historian background and information. And the person is additionally wanting to make sure, or wanting to know how we're checking the accuracy of the interactive website. And he in particular noticed a couple of things maybe that weren't connected correctly. So maybe you could speak to that, or let me just move on to the next one as well, because there's a question about whether there's a plan to make more maps interactive. So maybe Ashton, you could talk about that, and then maybe speak to how you check the accuracy of it.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's definitely a lot of ways that we could expand this and make more interactive maps. I think the story map is a really great platform, as I mentioned, to kind of tell a story through a map, which I think you could think of a lot of ways to do that. I think the hope is that this Hannah Holborn Gray Fellowship could continue, and that another fellow could kind of take on the work that I've done. When I kind of wrapped up this fellowship, I tried to document kind of how I operated things to make sure that this could continue and just wasn't stopped the minute that I finished the fellowship. And then the accuracy, I think a lot of this was kind of, for the typos, for example, a lot of this was hand typed just the way that it had to be. So those pop up. So honestly, if you see any typos, they're errors, I think maybe emailing probably Cecilia. She's the one who owns all the maps and the documents now that I completed the fellowship. But we would love some help with that. But we're also kind of, I think, using university resources. I think another meeting with special collections would be helpful as well, to make sure that we're presenting the information that we gather from them correctly too.
Thanks, Ashton. This is not a question, but just a note that the 1932 map is available as a jigsaw puzzle from the Alumni Association, just FYI. Then someone's wanting to know if you have history of how the U of C obtained additional land for its expansion, noting that she grew up in an apartment at 56th and Drexel.
Well, I have to say that I don't have information immediately to that, but I think the expansion of campus would be a really interesting area for future projects to see how land was acquired and why and how it was done. I think that that would be a great suggestion for another project.
Great. And someone's wondering if we can track the usage of the interactive maps. Can we tell how frequently or why or who they're asking?
Yes, that's right. And so we are using the ArcGIS Online platform for these, and that does have analytics in the background, which allows us some tracking, as does the library website for the landing page for the web exhibit. So we will be able to identify what the usage is for these.
Yeah. Someone is saying the growth of the campus and the history of the medical campus are wonderful ideas. Where do the ideas for interactive apps come from and what's next?
Well, this one was really born from Mindy's passion and knowledge of UChicago medicine. She was the initiator of this whole project, so that's where that first one came from. I think that we are wide open in terms of what the next project will be. Something that has been on my mind a lot recently has been who gets to tell the story of UChicago and how can we better engage with our complex history, particularly with the South Side. And I think that it's important that we dig into things like restrictive covenants, look at what is happening with our current efforts with the Civic Engagement Office, and look at the evolving relationship that Chicago has had with its community. So I think that that's a prime candidate for our next project.
Great, thank you. And someone's wanting to know what Dr. Mindy Schwartz thinks of the new design of the Student Health Center.
I have not seen it. All I see is what's going on in my backyard. I mean, I am fascinated by the fact that that is being upgraded because I think student health and student wellness are really important. One thing I will say doing this project is I've really been mindful of the fact that by and large, U of C tends to repurpose old buildings and not blow them up or get rid of them. And I think that's really important because some places just take an old building, bring it to the ground and start something new. And I like the fact that they are able to keep that old cloister because you don't see cloisters anymore. I mean, they're just totally from a different period. And my goal, like Cecilia was saying, is to really use this project to do a deeper engagement. I mean, because one of the things I've just seen in my 30 years here is there's been a total paradigm shift in the way the University of Chicago thinks about the community. And there are so many, like, you know, from Michelle Obama and the Urban Health Initiative to the Southside Health and Vitality Study, so many of my colleagues, both in the medical center and across campus, are deeply engaged in, you know, like Southside life and being part of this community and really making a difference to be change agents and to be, you know, fair community partners. And I think that as much as we've done egregious things in the past, I think that people here are deeply engaged and passionately committed to making a better future. And I think maybe we can use all the library resources to share what we're doing and, you know, how we want to go forward. I mean, one of the things I've done is that there's a great resource called the Encyclopedia Chicago. It's very, you know, it's written by all kinds of nationally known academic people here, and it goes over really basic stuff. What is redlining? What's the South Side? You know, what's the Bud Billiken Parade? Things that people who move to Chicago, like I did, you know, need to know about, and in a very accurate, high level, succinct, and easy way. So for me, the library has just been the source of helping understand like where we are and where we could go.
Thanks, Mindy. Someone's noting that the alumni years ago offered a colorized picture of the campus as seen by a balloon. That must have been fun. And then we have another question. Have we considered adding a layer of oral histories and those verbal recordings, whether just spoken word or videos?
I think that's fantastic, and the technology supports it. So we don't have any plans in place, but I think that that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
Great.
I think for accessibility reasons too, that would be great if someone wouldn't be able to scroll through and actually read story maps to kind of get the history told to them, would be really nice as well.
Great. All right, last chance for questions. These are great questions. Okay, here's one. Will any of this technology be particularly useful for medicine or education as the university moves past COVID?
What an interesting question. I think that we are in the middle of COVID, and I think that you know what they described, it's like building an airplane and flying it at the same time. You know, I mean, just think on one level, you know, I've gone to many of the library events, and we're doing it on Zoom. And even though it's not the same as being in person, boy, you know, it's kept us intact as a community. And I don't know where the technology is going to lead. I just know that we have to embrace change because change is inevitable and growth is possible. So I'll be curious to see what it shows.
Yeah, great. All right, maybe this should be our last question here. Would there be a way from this kind of project to find out the history and future use for campus buildings that now seem unused but are still standing? Breckenridge Hall or the Orthogenic School, for example. That's a tough one.
A lot of great suggestions for future projects. I hope we're going to save these. I'm trying to take notes,
Exactly.
but
I hope
fantastic.
So.
Yeah. So I mean, this is also not something that that I had thought of, but this sounds like an excellent potential use. I'm not sure how we would incorporate future use for buildings, but I think that there could be some really creative ways to do that. I'm so glad that we have you all as our beta testers here tonight. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And I really want to thank Dr. Mindy Schwartz and Dr. Cecilia Smith and Ashton Hicks for providing us with this really fascinating look at the University of Chicago's history through the library's map collection and special collections as well. And I look forward to really following the project and see how it progresses. Many thanks to all of you for joining us this evening and for putting in such really thoughtful, great questions for our speakers. Let me just add that you may know that we'll be marking the 50th anniversary of the Regenstein Library during the 2020 and 21 year, and we hope you are able to join us at events and activities in the year ahead. So thanks again, everyone, and good night. Thanks so much.